DC for the last couple of years have created this thing called compact comics, which the whole concept is here's a story, but you make it accessible, you make it cheaper, you make them smaller so the average Joe who wants to get into the comics can actually get into them. And you're like, these stories are meant to be a good gateway. They're meant to be like, hey, you never. You want to read some Batman stories? Well, here you go. Here's some, here's the go-tos and that. And the first one they did when they decided to do these combat comics way back in 2024, and I'm thinking of covering the entire compact line. But the first one they did, along with the core vowels, I'm aware, but the first one they did was Watchmen. Now, Watchmen makes sense why they made this into a compact. One, it's 12 issues, and it's thick. It's a thick piece of boy. It's a thick boy. Yes, it is. But is also critically acclaimed. It is kind of like the creme de la creme. I mean, a safe way to assume, the best way to describe Watchmen is like it's known as like the godfather of superhero comics. That it's like the creme de la creme, right? While talking about these compact comics, the billion-dollar question is, are these accessible? Would I actually recommend someone reading Watchmen? If they're like, hey, never read a comic before, or never read DC, and like maybe you've seen the movies, maybe you've seen the TV shows, but you never read the actual source material themselves. Well, what I will say is this. The Godfather comparison, I feel, is a bit fair. Because what Watchmen is it's meant to be a redestruction of the superhero genre and like the whole concept of what if they were real and what if there was like a superpower person and what the comic book genre like and how comics were made and superheroes and all that. And it was like the first of its kind. But since then, we have all these other deconstructions, to Kick-Ass, to The Boys, the comic and the TV show. I mean, let's be honest, the TV show is better than the comic. Let's be honest. But you got those. You have hell. You want to keep the deconstruction of the actual characters that they're deconstructing. Let's be honest. The Snyderverse is deconstructing the entire DC universe. So you keep seeing these deconstructions, some better than others, and it all stems from this. This is the original source. I just feel like if you have seen all these deconstructions, there's that whisk of like, not really liking it or not getting the hype because you're seeing all the other deconstructions that was inspired by Watchmen. And that's the thing. Now, the story itself is a mystery story that you got Rorschach, who is this, like, crazy, like, he's the detective kind of character. And he finds out that a guy named Everett Blake was a costume fighter. He was a comedian. And he has this theory that there are there's a killer on the loose hunting down costume heroes who used to be costume heroes. And if you've seen the live action movie, you basically read the comic. And I feel like it doesn't really bring anything new if you see, because you're like, well, I'm seeing emotion and just seeing it printed and to see its original form, it doesn't really, maybe does it a lot to people if you just know the Watchmen story. As well, there's also that whole sense of knowing it's also a deconstruction of comics. Like in this, there's a comic in a comic, the Tales of the Black Freighter, and that's like a comic in a comic, and there's this line about the some character says, I'm not a comic book villain. It's all these kind of meta commentary that if this is your first comic ever, or you're slightly new into it, you're like, it might be still that whole like, what's the hubbub? Like, what's the hubbub? I don't understand what's happening here? I don't understand the hype. Now there are great moments in it. You know, the even yes, it is very flashback heavy. It is very like, you know, we see the flashback of the comedian and flashback of Dr. Manhattan and Rorschach, and you know, jumping back and forth and that whole thing. And it's like it's very flashback heavy, and you might get flashback fatigue with these with this story where you know, the first Rorschach's journal is really good. Uh, you got the backstory of Rorschach himself, and then Doctor Manhattan. Those are pretty much are the highlights of the Watchmen story as a whole. But as a whole piece, it's just it is a one of those things where you start questioning, like, you know, it's the here's the aspect here's the aspect of the book, but does it hold up? I don't think so. I don't know. Like sometimes I'm reading it, and I'm like, it drags on. The dialogue's a bit deep in. Like it's just one of those situations where like you're reading it and you just don't. You appreciate it. The art is really good, but I just don't. It just doesn't really, you know, I'll say hooked you as it maybe did way